Hey Hannah, okay, so here are the things that we went over today. We talked about um, keeping, so this is also a review for the previous lesson. We talked about keeping our bodies expanded, okay? So whenever we're doing something like a turn, I don't want to crunch inwards, okay? I always want to make sure that I'm looking very powerful. So when I go to do my turns, I'll stay expanded throughout my arms and my shoulders, almost like my body is a balloon and I'm trying to fill the balloon with air. That's going to keep me nice and open, especially when I'm doing something like a duck, right? I'm doing my duck, I'm keeping myself expanded rather than allowing myself to crunch and raise my shoulders and duck my neck improperly, things of that nature. So whenever, especially when you're doing turns, make sure you stay expanded. Then we talked about the keeping the arm level. You have a habit of doing this with your arm every time you step on your 1, 2. So we're trying to get rid of that. We're trying to keep it just at the tabletop action that we've talked about before. So making sure that it stays fairly level here. We're going to go more into that here in a minute. Then we talked about halftime foot rolling. So I gave you a drill that's going to allow you to be able to take your ankles and expand your ankles when you're taking your triple steps versus just rolling your feet just barely without your ankles extending. So I want to make sure I'm getting movement out of my ankle versus no movement out of the ankle. In faster music, that's going to end up being a little bit less, and in slower music, I should see more ankle expansion. So the exercise I had you do is we went 1, 2, 3, 4. You notice that my heel of my foot ends up landing on the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an example. And then we talked about keeping your head moving a little bit, so making sure that when I'm doing this, I'm either looking where I'm going or I'm looking at my partner. This allows my body to look a lot more fluid rather than just keeping my arm or my head in the same direction as my chest the entire time, where I'm going to look a little bit more stiff. So we want to avoid that. Either look where you're going or look at your partner. Okay. So then we're talking about body movement today a lot. So body movement has to do with a skill called domino effecting. And what this means is essentially is that everything I do should look like it's connected rather than separate. So an example of this is if I raise this arm and then this hip comes out, there didn't seem to be any connection between my arm and the hip. But let's say my hip comes out and then my arm moves up. By my hip coming out and then my body rolls over and then my arm follows, those pieces are all connected to each other. So it dominoes from part to part to part, hip to waist to ribs to shoulder to arm to knuckles to fingers and all of that. So we want to connect the dots. Now there are two ways this happens. We either have energy coming from the outside of our body, okay, so we thought of like our anime paladin, right? So if I'm absorbing energy from the sun, I want to take that energy, bring it in, and then it comes into my core, or I'm filled with light energy, and I want to shoot that light energy out, which is probably going to be the more common one in this case. So what I had you do for an exercise is I had you essentially sit in a chair. You can do this standing up too. I had you lean first, then bring your elbow up, keeping this shoulder down. Yeah, I don't want to raise this shoulder. The lean is enough. Elbow. Then we did the wrist. Then we did the big knuckles, small knuckles, and then fingers. So that I would end up slowly getting a little domino effect here coming up the arm. So that my body was creating the movement and then everything else followed versus my arm just coming up, or maybe only the elbow and then the hand and then the rest of the forearm and hand, where it looks very disconnected. So I don't want to just do, right? I use this cat here as a symbol of energy, right? So the idea here is that the energy moves throughout my chest, and as it keeps moving, it kind of lifts my arm up and then comes out. And then when we go in the reverse direction, instead it ends up making gravity pull my arm down, and then it ends up coming into my body afterwards. So when we go to do this, I should be able to see the body, and then the arm follows, and then the arm comes, and then the body reacts by pulling it in. Okay, so practice that. Make sure to get all the joints. Then from there, we talked about doing some arm swinging. So what I don't want to see is the arm swinging first without the body moving. What I want to see is the body moves, and you can pick either both arms or just one arm, okay? I'm going to do just one arm for now, put this hand in my pocket. So I'm going to move my body first, and then my arm is going to follow my body. I don't want my arm to move first and for my body to follow for the exercises that I'm giving you. That's not necessarily always a bad thing, but in this case it will be. So body moves, body, arm, and so it should always look like my arm is lagging behind my torso. Then what I had you do is I had you kind of swing this side to side, and then I had your chest take little tiny baby circles, which will then throw your arm up and down. And I can bend forward here a little bit too. I'm not trying to twist at the moment. I'm just trying to swing it up and over so that my body feels like it's propelling my arm rather than my arm just going around in a circle independent of my body. Then what we did is we started applying this into our dance. So we did this in a left side pass. What I had you do is I had you open up your arms. You took your first 2 steps, 1, 2, and then you slowly hugged yourself oh, it's going to be okay, and then opened back up nice and slow. So we went 1, 2, slow, hug, open up, right? Rather than going 1, 2, happy hug, where I slap, and then ta-da with my arms open. Then we moved, we transitioned this a little bit, where I then had you only do it with one arm. So we had your arm out, 1, 2, you gave in that hug, and then you opened it back out. And then I had you take the palm and bring it down. So we then had 1, 2, slow, hug, open up. And then one last thing we added was the arm being here and this going underneath. So we went 1, 2, hug underneath, open up, right? So that's the difference between looking like this, where you would go 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and the arm looks detached from the body, versus 1, 2, my body turns, which makes my arm come in, and then my body opens up a little bit, which throws my arm out. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6. Or 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6. So keep that in mind. That's what we're trying to create. We did this in the sugar tuck as well. In the sugar tuck, I had you do this with a wall, where you would do your 1, 2, hand kind of comes up like a Nazi. And then from here, I'm going to push my elbow in with my hand staying still. And then I'm going to take this arm and I'm going to swing it outwards. And I'm just going to keep looking towards my wall here as my arm swings out, because my torso moves and then the arm comes out. It shouldn't be like the arm just comes out on its own as I step forward. Like this would be bad. It should be my body turns and so my arm wants to come out. So doing that away from the wall, that would look like this. 1, 2, 3, and. See that elbow? Okay, then from here, 1, 2, 3, and. I'm then going to allow the arm to swing back in, 4, and then triple, 5, and 6. I'll do that from this angle. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6. All right, Hannah, thanks so much. We'll see you next time, girl. Keep up the good work.